The balance interventions. Introduction. Some systems fail loudly, others fail by becoming too successful. When power accelerates faster than consequence, when certainty replaces caution, and when correction becomes impossible from within, the universe introduces hesitation. These recovered transmissions document a series of planetary-scale anomalies in which runaway imbalance was quietly interrupted, without violence, without heroes, and without explanation. Archivists classify these events under protocol. Hesitation prime. The universal failsafe. Witnesses call them coincidences. History calls them turning points. This is a record of moments when the universe declined to choose sides. Part 1. The day the sky declined to choose.
The planet had prepared carefully for war. It had rehearsed the language of inevitability, polished the speeches, aligned the symbols. Borders were drawn with confidence, timelines announced with pride. By the time the first aircraft lifted from their runways, the outcome had already been declared by everyone who needed it to be. No one expected interruption. The fighters climbed in disciplined formations, wings bright with intent, instruments singing the old promises of superiority and control. Pilots felt the familiar narrowing of attention, the place where doubt is trained to go quiet. And then the sky changed its mind. Not violently, not dramatically. The air simply refused to cooperate. At altitude, where aggression usually sharpens, metal softened, not melted into fire, just eased, as if heat had decided it was done pretending to be contained. Wings lost their rigidity. Control surfaces sagged, no longer hostile, no longer precise. Warning systems tried to escalate. They found nothing to warn about. Ejection protocols activated gently, without panic. Seats released. Pilots drifted downward under canopies that opened as if expecting this outcome all along. No alarms screamed. No explosions followed. On the ground, commanders waited for reports of impact. None came. Across the planet, radar screens filled with anomalies that refused classification. Analysts argued about interference, sabotage, solar events, anything that preserved the fiction of agency. But nothing hostile had occurred. No side had been attacked, no advantage gained, no casualty inflicted. The aircraft had simply declined to continue. Later, investigators would discover the damage was precise. Engines unharmed, avionics intact. Only those components necessary for aggression had been altered, temporarily, reversibly, without residue. As if the planet itself had raised a hand. In the following days, negotiations resumed, not because peace had been won, but because war had lost its momentum. The certainty that fuels escalation had evaporated, leaving behind an uncomfortable question no one wished to answer aloud. What happens when force is no longer an option? Civilians spoke of the event differently. Some called it a miracle. Others insisted it was coincidence stretched thin by fear. A few noticed subtler changes, the way rhetoric lost its heat, the way crowds dispersed more easily, the way old grievances sounded suddenly repetitive. No monuments were built. There was nothing to commemorate. Somewhere beyond the planet's awareness, a larger presence adjusted its course by a fraction too small to measure. The Wanderer did not linger. It did not observe the aftermath with interest. Balance had resumed. The intervention, if it could be called that, had cost nothing and solved nothing permanently. It had only restored the conditions under which systems could correct themselves again. On the planet, historians would later argue whether the day mattered at all. They would miss the point. What mattered was not that war had been prevented. What mattered was that, for one brief interval, the universe had refused to take sides, and in doing so, had reminded everyone that dominance is not the same as inevitability. The sky returned to normal. The world went on, and somewhere in the quiet between cause and consequence, equilibrium held, not because anyone had won, but because no one had been allowed to lose too much. Still, we traverse.
Part 2. The week the numbers forgot how to agree.
No one noticed at first. They rarely do. The planetary exchange had been volatile for years. Speculation piled on speculation, wealth abstracted so thoroughly that no one could remember what it was meant to represent. Entire populations lived inside algorithms they did not understand, borrowing futures from systems that no longer required collateral. Collapse was expected, just not like this. On Monday, the markets opened normally. On Tuesday, pricing models began disagreeing. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger safeguards, just enough to be inconvenient. On Wednesday, predictive engines produced incompatible forecasts. Every projection contradicted another. No narrative of inevitability could form. By Thursday, confidence had evaporated. Traders hesitated. Investors stalled. Automated systems entered recursive loops, unable to select preferred outcomes. No crash occurred. No fortunes were erased overnight. Instead, momentum dissolved. Leverage lost meaning. Speculation stopped compounding. Risk refused to accelerate. The economy did not fall. It flattened, like a wave encountering an invisible shore. Emergency committees assembled. They found no breach, no hack, no anomaly. Only statistics that no longer agreed with themselves. Behind the numbers, something had shifted. Profit still existed. So did loss. But neither could dominate. Extraction slowed. Exploitation stalled. Debt ceased growing faster than labor. For the first time in generations, accumulation became difficult. People began to notice, not the intervention. The breathing room. Small businesses stopped disappearing. Housing stabilized. Food prices stopped climbing. No one announced reform. No revolution occurred. The system simply lost its appetite for excess. Months later, economists would call it the plateau. Politicians would claim credit. Corporations would quietly adjust. Only a few archivists noticed the correlation. 3 years earlier, the sky had declined to choose. Now, the numbers had done the same. Somewhere beyond the planet's awareness, equilibrium held, again, not by decree, by subtraction of inevitability.
Part 3. The day the stories stopped working.
The broadcasts were flawless. That was the problem. Every channel carried the same cadence. Every speech followed identical arcs. Every symbol arrived on cue. The planet had perfected persuasion. No dissent was outlawed. It was made irrelevant. Narratives were refined until they fit every demographic, every grievance, every hope. Truth no longer mattered. Resonance did. Belief had become an industry, and it was profitable. Then, one morning, the slogans began to feel thin, not false, just weightless. A minister delivered a speech that should have electrified the population. Applause arrived late. An influencer released a manifesto. It went politely unnoticed. A viral campaign launched. It stalled at 20,000 views and never grew. The machinery was intact, the messaging pristine, but nothing stuck. Metaphors collapsed. Catchphrases sounded repetitive. Icons felt ornamental. People began changing channels mid-sentence. Not in anger, in boredom. Propaganda requires emotional traction. That traction vanished. By the third week, belief markets were in freefall. No narrative could dominate. No ideology could consolidate. No outrage could sustain itself. Extremes softened, certainties blurred. Journalists called it attention fatigue. Psychologists blamed overstimulation. No one noticed the deeper shift. Stories no longer reorganized reality. They had become optional. Communities began improvising again. Local truths resurfaced. Small-scale meaning returned. Control had not been seized. It had been outgrown. In a sealed archive, a notation was made. H' pattern confirmed. Narrative dominance disrupted. Nonviolent, system stabilizing. On the streets, people simply felt lighter. They argued more, agreed less, believed carefully. The stories still existed. They just no longer ruled. End transmission. Stay tuned for more from the Keeper's Living Logs on Wanderer Chronicles Radio. Thanks for listening. Still, we traverse.